Hello, I hope you're doing well through this nation, this global pandemic and virus, coronavirus. I hope it has not, cost you maybe the lives of those close to you. It's a very serious thing. As this pandemic was developing its momentum, and the United States was you know, it was like uh, on a schedule. It's your turn. But I was watching it and watching it gain momentum, and I remember saying to myself, "It's like, wow, this is a real serious thing." And it was. My education went virtual. I had to wear a mask now, things like that. Um, so if you're watching this 100 years from now, you can get a little feedback about how this virus just touched everyone, every sector of life. But I hope you have done well with it. My closest friends and relatives seem to be navigating the pandemic just fine. Let's get into it. My name's Tomlin Nyback, and this is 365 Days Towards Racial Change, which is not enough to get the message across. Even if I recorded the same message 365 times. But here is to get you thinking, even if I'm redundant and whatnot, to get your mind in a position to change your life, whatever side of the equation you're on. It's too bad there is an equation. We just were born into it, and our in America, United States, our skin color has, boy, really played a part in our identity, how we live, move, and breathe in the world. It's not fair. We didn't create it, but I think there's some basic things we can glean on, how we want to be treated, how we want to treat our fellow national citizen and also global citizens. Muhammad Ali didn't. He refused to go to Vietnam, and rightfully so, because he said, I got no reason to exercise violence against those people. They've done nothing, and the nation just had, such, the intentions to go to Vietnam and all that history. It didn't make sense to Muhammad Ali because he'd never been there, didn't know anyone, right? And so what's this machine that the nation has created that's chopping bodies up to bits and pieces way over in a foreign land? It's just not right. And so I count myself in a lot of ways part of a global community. That there are other overarching agencies that want to keep fear and paranoia, us against them, alive. And I think that's on both sides as well, a lot. That's way beyond the scope of racial change. Racial change is more domestic. We're talking about racism within the United States. And we talk about a lot of issues, peoples. We want to talk about the Navajo Nation coming up in the next couple episodes. I have some roots in the Lenape Nation on the East Coast, but my family never adhered or practiced any of that, but have some Native American roots in my blood as well. Oh, racism, navigating power, strategies to work with it or against it, to do some Tai Chi, some Judo, apply some characteristics of surfing to capture some of that energy, to tack like a seasoned person on a sailboat, to be able to move that boat totally against the wind, so to speak. And there's we just educate ourselves here on how to do that. Yeah, and I think it's important on both sides. If you are a person who is interested in fellowship, community, right? Initially, in this forum, our focus is Black people, the history of Black people in the United States, and all that. But please note that it's not a space for racism. The illustrations and the things we glean from the Black experience are to liberate Black folks, but also to see Black folks rise to the point as a total community and be competitive in the wealthiest, richest, freest nation on earth. It's so sad it's not our experience overall. It's just not. So I'm inspired to do this work by a man named Dr. Claud Anderson. He can articulate these things much better than I can. I've read 3 of his works. This information came to me just in time, very life-saving, very much. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. We're in this book today on the last question, question 101, if you have the text. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice, and Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America. Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com, and here on YouTube, he's easy to find. Behind me, you see the hashtag S2 symbol. You'll find Black women supporting one another, getting their resources together. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a Black Facebook experience. If you can't find your flavor here on the World Wide Web, do what I did. Start your own little blog, video thing, whatever. People seem to be handing it out, and I'm just taking advantage, trying to get these videos out the way. If you got a business, entrepreneurial mind, check out Dr. Boyce Watkins at the Black Business School, theblackbusinessschool.com. Check out Tyrone Gregory, the self-employed tax guy. Let him know Thomas Nyback sent you on over there. If you've got interest in how money works in America, around the globe, Federal Reserve, things like that, read this book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, G. Edward Griffin. And we're going to be up for story time. Again, we're starting to revisit various points in Uncle Tom's Cabin, just so that it's not all boring facts, statistics, and me ranting and raving all the time. A Black History Reader, all right. Question 101 is, it says, what immediate steps can we take to be self-sufficient, be a self-sufficient competitive group in America? And Dr. Anderson lays out a few strategies. In this particular question, he's really focused on ethno-aggregation. Now, remember ethno-aggregation, real simple. Keeping with the wealth and resources percolating and um, growing inside the ethnic community, all the other groups employ the same kind of tactic. They're not out on the street waving banners and whatnot, so to speak, but you know that they're very organized. They give favor to their own and all that stuff. I've been talking to you about the Hispanic crew putting on a new roof. Well, you know, if you approach whether they're union or private contractors, well, you know, there's a language there, right? So that's how that community keeps um, keeps that kind of activity in-house, and then they're supporting each other, and the finances, they're probably keep bringing money into their community instead of spilling it out as black folks most often do. Dr. Anderson, he'll give us the definition of ethno-aggregation right here out of the book. The voluntary concentration of individuals' resources and votes around a population's common need to improve their economic and political competitiveness, right? It means in-house, right? It's very simple. You keep it in-house. You know, a few episodes ago, we talked about Berry Gordy and, you know, building up Motown and all that stuff, and he had that was a good example of ethno-aggregation and also vertical integration to a degree, I'm sure. You know, but it was black groups, it was black ownership. You know, I had a hierarchy inside, and you know, you bring the money in and allow it to build pressure and momentum. But then he sold it to a Dutch firm. So there went the um, one of the representations of black ethno-aggregation. You know, some of the stuff I'll talk about today is we've talked about before, where to have some cooperation, talked about enthusiasm for the vision next time, have a vision and all of that. That will give you the ability to um, really see ethno-aggregation maximize itself so that more black people can be competitive. You know, we've got some issues to navigate um, with us not being unified and intentional in what we want to do. See, the long view is, you know, would be to be like, you know, it's not about getting the highest dollar all the time. You know, sometimes it's to have some allegiance to a vision, to a banner, to a creed, and where dollar amounts don't impact that. Dr. Anderson tells an interesting story about he was approaching, I think, some Oriental culture, I think Japanese, with a product or service, and they couldn't get through, and they gave him various estimates and schemes and things like that, and finally they say, well, let's go in, let's really give them a super duper discount that they can't refuse. And so they presented it, they pitched it, and this group of business people still said no, and they're like, wait, they were incredulous. How can you refuse this discount? And we upped our services and all that. And the reply they got back was you black people don't understand. Uh, we just don't deal with you. We deal with our community on this issue. There's nothing you can say or do, discount. Probably can't give it away for free to us because this is in-house. Right? They had run into a group that perfected their ethno-aggregation and their allegiance to the group so that um, there was just integrity maximized within um, within that community, in that context, and their allegiance was firm, right? Racist or not, they held on. You couldn't just throw money at them and have them um, roll over and succumb to making profit and stuff like that. Those words, that kind of language, should not impact ethno-aggregation, right? And this is something that it'd be interesting to see the black community get a hold of um, to any degree, right? I don't know anything where black people are that adamant about keeping the resources in-house to where they can resist some of the dollar amounts of money thrown at them. Look, I mean, if you look at major sports, baseball is a good example. We had a Negro League, right? But when white scouts saw that talent out there, they threw out the money, and boom, the Negro League has disappeared. All the things we black people are proficient at could totally be under black control, but we we don't first have that allegiance, that interior allegiance to ourselves, and we're vulnerable to outside influence at the same time. So, um, Dr. Anderson's ethno-aggregation, man, it's such the way he describes it and wants it implemented is the cream of the crop. But it's just going to be tough getting there. You got to find people to willing to hold on to what they got, and come hell or high water, they're going to favor their group first and foremost. So we need a collective common denominator. We recognize the deleterious impact of integration. Recognize the long-term effects of something called meritorious manumission. Quick review: meritorious manumission was where a slave could possibly get freedom if they put their master's life ahead of their own, improved a process to enrich the business, especially towards machinery and things like that, to make business more profitable for the slave master, or to inform on slaves who were about to thinking about revolting or escaping. Those are the big three chunks of meritorious manumission. And it's important to know meritorious manumission because that is it's one of the tactics that slave ownership used to keep slaves disunified, suspicious of one another, uh, things like that. So, understanding meritorious manumission and any of the things that Black people may still be living and acting out in the community from way back hundreds of years ago, things that may still be a part of the Black communal experience. So we need to work at reversing those effects. First step, of course, is to recognize it, name it, own it. Then we can move on from it. We need to recognize other groups are working so efficiently at this thing, unity, enthusiasm, a national plan, plan for their community. I think it was yesterday or last time we met, I talked about this, where another problem for Black folks is we don't recognize this tenacious unity being employed by other groups. We only, it's often the periphery, if it's in our mind at all. It's in the back of our mind that the Vietnamese are together, the Hispanics are together, the white folks are together, the Arabs are together. We recognize them as being a similar kind of people, but we don't recognize that by almost automatically, on a kind of autopilot, these groups exercise naturally this allegiance to their own, right? And like based on this thing I just said about meritorious manumission, that kind of thing comes so much harder for Black folks, and especially if Black folks aren't like working on these things. If the community, if we got these shortcomings that have been passed down from generation to generation, spirits, geists that have never been exercised, they just keep growing. They can keep passing on to the next generation, pass it on to the next generation, right? And without them ever being exercised, they just keep going on and on and on. But part of it, a big step. I've been in 12 steps, self-help a lot, right? And they talk about the first step and the powerlessness and admitting and all this stuff. Well, yeah, you can't do anything until you admit the issue, the problem. That first step in the self-help is the same first step in any problem. First step is admitting you have the problem. That's the problem, right? And so often, the Black issues where we keep moving out, and this is my personal experience as well. I'm not saying this like I'm some guru who has mastered something or that's never been touched by the issue, that's never lived out the problem and infected others. Right? I'm a full participant. Trust me. We're just hoping my mind has gone through a transformation at this point. But what I'm saying to you is like, and from my perspective, put it like that, I don't see the Black community as taking that time to work on healing. I know my ancestors, definitely on my dad's side of the family, which is enough, were slaves. That is a fact. The history of America. That my last name is associated probably with some slave masters. It's off somewhere. But I know that my family has never engaged in a specific effort to work on exercising some of the bad effects of that kind of relationship, that kind of association in America. And I'm talking, you know, some counseling, some recognition, but it's hard because it's hard when, especially for a person that is functioning at some level. Me, I had some other issues that makes me adamant about this piece of making ethno-aggregation successful, right? Admitting a problem first is because I have a lot of experience in a clinical setting, talking about my problems and issues and how it has impacted my life and what's going on with my um, mentality and stuff like that. I spent a lot of years in that, but I was forced to because I had this other peripheral issue going on that drove me to find some help, right? But we can apply this same uh, tactic to racism, to being a victim of this, right? It's the same thing. Like oh, the female watches her father get drunk and brutalize her mother, right? You hear this story sometimes, and the female, this witness, finds herself being attracted to the same kind of man. Well, that's the same type of way the generation passes its illness on to the next generation. Or the son that watches his father get drunk and batter the woman, and suddenly the son is a raging alcoholic and he is abusing his wife. It's the same thing that goes on, passes on from generation to generation. And there's a lot of ways to stop that. There's a lot of things you can do to check that. But I think in every instance, it is to recognize a problem, an issue in there. And then you go pray or go to self-help or counseling, pay a clinician, get on a hotline or something, go online and share your story, things like that. That's how you um, do a 180 on those generational curses like that. But it doesn't happen until you say, there's a problem here. I'm just like my father. I'm behaving like my mother. I mean, boy, I'm diving down, and sometimes becoming worse than the certain examples that taught me some bad behavior or attitudes or way of thinking. Right? These things are apparent and left to fester in the black community, uh, in my opinion, and some need its day in the light. I reflect a lot on my upbringing, my parents, my family. When I think about this project and whatnot, it's like, wow, this is fundamental, foundational stuff that's can, if approached rightly, we can at least have a fighting chance at putting aside or killing off some of the negative effects of slavery. But as long as we go on like we're all right, that we got the job or got our education better or something like that, that these things don't touch us, we're going to be in a lot of hot water. We'll be self-deceived, to say the least. Hey, thanks for letting me go on there. We're about out of time, and I want you to think about those things in your life, even if you are privileged, whatever. Have you ever thought about your history and what negative aspects of your history may be on your shoulders that you might need to take a look at? I'm Thomas Nyback. That's 365 days towards racial change. Day 341 out of the way. We're moving right along. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.